Hey everybody, Mac Master here, back with Marvel Heroes, and this time we're expanding on our little critical hit experiment there and showing what critical hit does. And it was good because I also looked at Psylocke's guide, and that kind of clearly shows exactly what happens with critical hit also. She does it in a much more complicated form to make all the DPS factors work, so you get a damage per second. So, it has to be much more complicated. I just simplify everything, use a simple hit, and use that as an example of what happens, and you can extrapolate that and apply that to everything that happens, because that's how it will work. And she clearly shows that, or he. I don't know why I call her him and she, but it's Psylocke, so I'm just used to the girl character. And basically, if you look at it, I think the example on the guide is a 40% crit with a 10% brutal strike equals like a 1.38 coefficient, which is beautiful because it's showing somewhere around 30% of the damage is coming from critical hits and 60% or 70% of the damage is coming from normal hits, which is why damage rating kind of outweighs critical hits. However, when we're looking at cores, which is what this is about, we're taking off from our damage stats and looking at cores. I mean, it looks kind of broken here. You got, for your choice, of 4,000 damage rating on critical hits, critical damage rating, versus 1,000 damage rating straight out on a core. That just seems wrong. So I did break out the math, and we got the damage rating first. And, fortunately for damage rating, it does carry out overall hits. So, when you're looking at it, it's not as terrible as it would seem, because essentially you're getting that bonus of 1,000 damage rating, or 25% damage bonus carried out over all hits. And, so that's pretty big. And then, you actually get that damage bonus plus half applied to your critical hits. So I think that's where the development team was thinking, you can't really do so much extra damage rating, otherwise it could outweigh the critical damage rating, so they had to do more critical damage rating. But still, it's a big number, as the title says, David versus Goliath here. And so here's the formula for how the damage rating works. It basically comes out on 10 hits at a 40% crit rate. I figure 40% is pretty good. It's probably above average. I think my Emma is sitting much lower because I did go solid damage rating. I don't even use a wizard's medal. I do use a wizard's medal. Something people don't realize is they can swap back and forth. So when I do X defense, when there's a lot of mobs and big areas to cover, I use the wizard's medal a lot, or the Dr. Octopus's medal. And when I do the cosmics and we're done clearing trash and everything, I'll switch over to the wizard's medal and get the more damage and kill the boss faster. That's a strategy you can use. Unless it's a big spawning boss where it's got like 2 spawn ads or 2 spawn affixes on it, I'll stay with the Dr. Octopus's medal. I use probably the Dr. Octopus's medal 60 to 75% of the time. The wizard's a little bit less, obviously, 25%, 30% of the time. Just because the area, that we hit with these little spells here isn't as big. I mean, this is with 30% bonus just about, so it's really not that big. And being able to hit a bigger area can be much more important sometimes than having an extra, 500 damage rating, about 12.5% damage extra. Being able to hit, say, 5 extra mobs would actually net me a lot more damage than being able to do some more damage rating. And having to spam the spells all over the place and trying to hit extra mobs, especially with the little size that Telepathic Torment really hits. And Inspire Minion actually getting maybe an extra mob or 2, that's a lot of damage. And then, of course, getting a huge kneel before me always helps. And then being able to hit teammates off screen with unlocked potential kind of helps them as well. So that's kind of the strategy of what I think of with X Defense and Dr. Octopus's metal and you know, trash mobs on clearing cosmics versus boss mobs. So going into the critical damage rating, you can see that you lose a lot of damage on the normal hits. So the 6 hits kind of stay flat. We don't get as much damage. And of course we get a big boost of damage on the critical hits. But if we add it up together, wait a minute, what's this? How can this be? How does 4,000 critical damage rating lose to 1,000 damage rating? It is David versus Goliath. David won. The little stone won. How is that? Well, it's just like in the coefficients of Silex Guide, and what I've been showing you all along is getting 14, well, essentially 12 hits at 25% damage is much better than getting 4 hits at an extra 50% extra damage, which is what's really going on here. Because you got your 10 normal hits at 25% damage with damage rating. Okay, 1,000 damage rating being 25% extra damage. 10 normal hits, saying you don't crit at all, right? But you do have 4 crits, which get an additional 50% extra damage of your normal damage. So we actually take those 4 hits and cut that in half. That equals 2, because it's only 50% instead of 100%. So that would be 12 hits at 25% damage compared to 4 hits at an additional 50% extra damage, because each 1,000 critical damage rating is actually only 12.5% extra damage to a critical hit. So you're getting a total of 50% critical damage rating on 4 hits compared to 25% damage rating on 12 hits, effectively. That's how damage rating beats it out. Now, this won't hold true in an extreme long run. In other words, if you just completely go all crit and critical damage, you will eventually slightly outweigh damage rating. Slightly. And what I mean is, you won't outweigh it if you went fully damage rating. I just mean if you went full all-out damage rating, you had 1 piece left, and it was between a critical damage piece like, say, Ziggurat, which is a nice little piece if you're going crit and crit damage, and say Pluvian. The Ziggurat would outweigh the Pluvian because you've already done Gungnir, you've already done 4,000 critical damage on your costume, you've already done max crit everywhere you can, you've taken all crit on your gear, you've done crit, 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 crit everywhere, critical damage, crit and critical damage insignias, crit and critical damage rings, crit and critical damage wherever you can get on artifacts, critical hit and damage on your Uru. You know, you've done everything you could to get crit and critical damage, so you've neglected everything else, and you've lost a lot of damage, by the way, but you've just done it anyways. And maybe you got a phenomenal coefficient on Silex Guide. Say you hit 1.6, right? And you did that. Then you start weighing out damage rating versus critical damage rating. That's when you start winning out with the critical damage rating or critical hits with that 1 piece. But if you had stacked damage rating pieces, equivalent powerful damage rating pieces, not picking and choosing some puny little 50-point damage rating thing compared to a Ziggurat or something. Compare like a Pluvian or Advanced Crimson Crystal or a nice 300 meta sensory or something like that to something considerably as potent in the critical rating, or like a Warlock's Eye for Emma compared to the Gungnir. And by the way, I'll show those comparisons in here and how that works in a real comparison. You will start to win out because you've built for crit or you've built for damage rating. So damage rating will continue to exponentially pay out over critical. And basically that's how it works. even if you go to the forums and you look at it, someone had to build a lot of critical damage rating for Gungnir to finally kind of beat out the Warlock Eye. And that's it. So that's why I go with Warlock's Eye. I got my Emma. I didn't go any damage on core. I went hit points. So the things you can do with core is 1,000 dodge. That's something some people used to do. It's not really worth doing anymore, I don't think. You can get up to 5,000 hit points. These are the defensive things you can do. 5,000 hit points being probably the best thing you could do defensively. Offensively, you got your choice between 800 crit rating, 4,000 critical damage rating, 1,500 damage rating versus targets attacking you. So if you're the tank and taunt gets working again properly, you can do that. Or the preferred way to go if you're going to do damage would be 1,000 damage rating. But I would tell you to go with hit points. If you ever done an X defense and then somewhere around X defense 15 started watching people getting one-shotted all the time, it's because they went with all offense and they're doing time to kill things on dummies and thinking that's what's going to work in an X defense. And I just sit there and laugh at them as they die and run back, and then they die and they run back and they die and they run back, and then once that wave is dead, I leave, and then they complain that somebody left and they're wondering why people left, because I'm not going to carry somebody that's continually dying because they can't take one hit because they got like 9,000 hit points. Sure, they can kill a boss dummy in, I don't know, 20 seconds or something. My Emma does it in 25 or something like that. Faster if I blow out the ultimate, I guess. Like I said, I'm sitting at 3,860 mental damage rating before I even count the advanced skill targeting or the boots or anything else that's hidden. And it's just the way it is. You gotta have hit points to survive. So that's why I go for the 5,000 hit points. But if you're gonna choose damage, I would build the damage rating because it's going to carry over. You're going to get a lot of free crit, At 645 crit, I got 15% chance. That's not counting this. It's not counting Dr. Octopus's, which is another 600. Probably putting me at somewhere around 27% chance to crit. I got a 11% chance to brute. Brutal Strike doesn't really account for much. It might be really 4% of what criticals do. Criticals is much more important than our brutal strikes. Don't worry so much about brutal strikes. Worry more about crits if you're going with the crit right. Take whatever free brutal strikes you can. But I got one Gila and 3 Odins, and bosses melt really, 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 really fast. They just die. And the Gila helps with the brutes, and the brutes basically help burn off trash, and they help with the boss too, and they're fun to watch those little red things happen, and nice little Hand of Glory procs. But the Odin really makes bosses just evaporate. So that's 15% extra damage that's happening on top of my almost 5,000 mental damage rating that's happening also. That's behind the scenes. So that's it. That's how David beat Goliath yet again. So, hope it helps. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to everyone later.